After my second differentiation into a beta, I asked for a divorce from the nemesis I'd been in an arranged marriage with for years. He kept putting it off and hadn't even been back to the house we shared in ages. At my wit's end, I brought it up again at a family dinner, right in front of everyone. Before I got an answer, I got a slap from my alpha mother. "There's a time and a place for games, Evan," she said. "Do you really think it's appropriate to say that in front of our in-laws and all these people?" The slap was so hard my ears started ringing. Caleb caught me from behind just before I could fall backward into a display of gaudy pastries. I shoved him away like I'd been electrocuted. They all noticed, and the mood in the room soured. My father, Chris, rushed over and put his arm around my shoulders. "Is this because we were just pushing you two to conceive?" he asked softly. "Are you angry? It's okay, you just need to hurry up these next few years." I yanked my hand back. "Stop it." When I looked up, my eyes were already bloodshot. Caleb seemed to sense something was wrong. He strode forward, grabbed my hand, and started pulling me toward the door, not forgetting to call back to our parents. "Sorry, Mom, Dad. He's just been a little mad at me the last couple of days." I stood my ground, refusing to move. "Look at that kid. So full of life even after all this time," Caleb's father said, trying to smooth things over. My mother, Monica, raised her wine glass and clinked it against Mr. Miller's. "Boys will be boys. Don't mind him." The Millers replied, "Of course not. Evan's been part of our family for 6 years. We've always thought of him as our own son." I couldn't stand hearing it. I shoved Caleb away again, hard, and lost my own balance in the process. As I fell, I instinctively grabbed a beautiful sculpture next to me. Its base wasn't properly secured, and it shattered on the floor with a tremendous crash. The noise seemed to stun me. I just sat there, dazed. My dad hurried to help me up, and Caleb was already kneeling beside me, checking for injuries. "Evan, are you hurt? Let me see." "Evan, honey, why are you so clumsy? You scared me to death." But I just let out a bitter laugh and slowly pushed myself up off the floor. "Mom." I looked at the woman whose eyes were now blazing with anger. Forcing my voice to stay steady, I asked, "Where's the ivy plant I had here?" That was the match that lit the fuse. "Evan, I think you've lost your mind," she exploded. "You haven't been home in ages, and the first thing you do is demand a divorce and ask about some stupid plant? Do you have any respect for your parents left at all?" I fought to control myself. "I just want to know what happened to the ivy plant that was in this spot." "You." Chris stepped in, grabbing her and releasing his pheromones to calm her down. "Let's just talk. Don't get upset." We agreed. "He's finally home, we need to be patient." She stared at me for a long time, then took a deep breath and let out a cold sneer. "It died. I threw it out, pot and all. It's long gone." My mouth opened, but the words came out strained. "You knew. You knew it was the only thing Grandma left me." Caleb spoke softly. "It's okay. I'll find it for you. I promise I'll find it and replant it." He released his own alpha pheromones to soothe me, the scent of cedar slowly wrapping around me like an embrace. But then his brow furrowed, and his expression turned strange. In the past, even though I couldn't stand him, our high alpha-omega compatibility meant that his pheromones would always draw out a bit of my own grassy scent, and the two would intertwine. "Something feel off, Caleb?" I said. "What's wrong, Evan?" he asked me, but an alarm was already ringing in his head, a premonition that something painful was about to happen. Caleb's gut feeling was right. I pulled the test results from my pocket. I had a second differentiation. I'm a beta. Our compatibility is 0 now. I ignored their shocked faces. I had never been this calm in years. I just said, "So, can we talk about the divorce now? When did this happen?" Monica sat on the sofa, pinching the bridge of her nose. She was clearly furious with me, but her omega had already given her a lecture before our talk, so she was at least willing to pretend to be calm and have a civil conversation. I clutched my cup, trying to draw some warmth from the last 2 sips of tea. The symptoms started 6 months ago. The differentiation completed a little while ago. Beside me, Caleb shot to his feet. "Something this huge happened, and you never told me?" he asked in disbelief. His eyes were a mixture of hurt and shock. I looked at him and said, "You know, I've only ever wanted to divorce you. If you hadn't been avoiding me for the past 6 months, if you had just come home once, you would have found out. You would have seen an omega in that spacious house, desperately clawing at his own scent gland, trying to guide a differentiation without an alpha's help. You would have seen it until all his glandular fluid was spent in the differentiation heat, his gland shriveling up like a pot boiled dry. But you missed all of it." Caleb turned away and took a long, deep breath. When he looked back, his eyes were full of disappointment. "You know why? You were trying to divorce me. Evan, what did I do wrong? Can you please just tell me instead of skipping all the communication and jumping straight to the final step?" Chris and Mrs. Miller chimed in, trying to persuade me. "That's right, can't we just talk this out? Caleb has always been so steady. Is there some kind of misunderstanding?" When I didn't answer right away, Monica snapped, "Speak. I want to hear exactly who here has wronged you so badly that you have to destroy this family." I flinched reflexively, biting my lip hard. "Because we were wrong from the start," I said. "I never wanted to get married in the first place. I think you've completely lost it." Monica moved fast. Before anyone could react, she slapped me again. Hard. Then, her hand trembling, she pointed a finger at me, her flicker of regret quickly masked by a blustering severity. "A 96% match with Caleb, a friendship since childhood, and how good Mr. and Mrs. Miller have been to you all these years. What on earth could you possibly be unhappy about? Or are you just feeling rebellious now that you're grown, trying to defy your family? Is your conscience completely gone?" I tried to pull my lips into a smile, but it only made me look more miserable. Then, in a flash, to everyone's astonishment, I slapped her back. The crisp sound echoed in the room. Monica looked at me in disbelief. "You dare hit me?" Chris lunged forward, grabbing Monica's hands while scolding me. "Evan, how could you treat your mother like that?" I asked her. "Did that hurt?" "No, it didn't, because I used to be an omega, and now I'm a beta who just got through a differentiation. I don't have a tenth of your strength. You can't understand the pain of being slapped and kicked around by you in public. So you can call me ungrateful, call me rebellious. Mom, you never once asked me if I wanted any of this, or if I was hurting." Monica didn't dare struggle, afraid of hurting Chris, so she could only glare at me, her eyes filled with fury. "Can parents ever be wrong? Just think for a second about what's best for you." I gave a bitter laugh. "What's best for me? Changing my college major behind my back and forcing me to study horticulture, which I hated. What's best for me? Dragging me to City Hall on my 20th birthday, right in the middle of my party, to get married." Mrs. Miller put a hand on my arm and exchanged a look with her husband. She asked me sorrowfully, "Evan, maybe we were too hasty, wanting you two to settle down. But in all these years, have you truly not felt any of our love for you? Evan, was there something we didn't do right?" "No, that's not it," I said, taking a few steps back. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, it's not the same thing." At some point, tears had started to fall, and I wiped them away messily. "I know you've been good to me, but that's different. The pain they caused me here couldn't be erased by kindness from somewhere else. It was like robbing Peter to pay Paul." Monica's anger hadn't faded. Seeing me so unresponsive only fueled her rage. She called for the security guards. "If you won't listen to reason, then you can sit in timeout and think about what you've done." Caleb had been standing between me and Monica ever since the slap, and now he shielded me completely. "No, Evan's afraid of the dark. You can't lock him up. Mom, let's all just calm down. I'll take Evan home. I promise I'll talk to him." I looked at the guards. They wore black suits and earpieces, their faces impassive. They were old-timers in their own way, the same men who'd been here since I was a child. Even when new guards were hired, they had to be trained by the veterans first. The core of their training was unwavering duty, which was why they never opened the door for me. Not even when I was curled up in a ball in that pitch-black storage room. So miserable. They were never moved. I scrambled to my feet and stumbled up to the top floor. Caleb chased after me, shouting, "Evan, stop running." I ran as if a ghost was on my heels, his voice only making me go faster. I took the stairs to the attic 2 at a time. And it was true, the guards were right behind me. Our parents, along with the housekeeper and butler, followed soon after. It had rained earlier that evening. I grabbed onto the decorative pillars on the balcony, ignoring how slippery they were, and clambered onto the roof in a few quick moves. Just like when I was a kid, climbing up to find the doll I had hidden on the roof. That ragged doll, a defective, unsold toy I'd bought from a street stall. When I brought it home, Monica took one look at it and threw it away in front of me. I fished it out of the trash and hid it on the roof, carefully shielding it from the wind and rain. I climb up to see it whenever I missed it. But eventually, the doll was found, torn to pieces, and thrown in the trash. Just like me, no matter how much I ran, they could always chase me down and climb up after me. The shard of broken pottery in my hand finally served its purpose. "Don't come any closer," I yelled, holding it to my neck. "One more step and I'll do it." The men behind me clearly didn't take me seriously. I turned and slashed the shard viciously across my own arm. One corner of the pottery was incredibly sharp, and as a former Omega, my skin was thinner. The cut immediately started gushing blood down my white arm. From the balcony below, they could see everything happening on the roof. I heard Chris scream and cling to the railing, crying, "Don't scare your father. I'm begging you. Evan, all of you, get down now." Monica yelled at the head guard, pointing at him. The guards exchanged glances, then retreated back down to the balcony. Caleb was frantic. Ignoring his parents' protests, he vaulted himself onto the roof and stood a short distance in front of me. He started to release his pheromones to calm me, but then he remembered our compatibility was now 0. His eyes turned red, and he held out his handkerchief. "I know you don't want to see me, but your hand will get infected. You love to draw, don't you? It would be terrible if this affected your drawing." I didn't take it. I backed away toward the edge of the roof, fumbling in my pocket for a tie, which I used to haphazardly bind the wound. "Evan, whatever's wrong, just tell me. I'll fix it for you. Okay? Promise. I'll even give up my company if I have to." Caleb's voice was soft, as if he were afraid of startling a butterfly resting on a branch. I asked him, "You knew from the very beginning that I didn't like you, right?" He nodded. "Yes." "Then why? Why did you marry me?" Caleb's eyes were bloodshot, his fists clenched. "Because I love you, Evan." I was naive. I thought that after we got married, there would be more opportunities for you to fall in love with me too. But he never expected that I would despise him so much that I could resist the pull of his pheromones. His voice trembled. "I was wrong, Evan. I never should have forced you to be with someone you don't love." I laughed, and the taste of salt filled my mouth. "Go downstairs and sign the papers." Caleb wrestled with himself for a long moment before giving in. "Okay," he said. "It's a deal then. We'll be your witnesses. Can you please come down now?" My father pleaded from below. I looked down at them, my face pale from blood loss. My voice was hoarse as I asked, "Why did you have to push me this far?" Monica looked me in the eye, unable to understand. "Have we really been so bad to you? When have you ever not had the best of everything? We even paved the way for your entire future. And you used this to threaten us? Are you trying to kill us with anger?" I smiled sadly as tears welled up and rolled down my cheeks. I held up the tie on my arm. "See this? This was supposed to be a gift for you. I can't give it to you now. When I was little, I stained one of your ties and you held me and said it was okay, that when I grew up and made money, I could buy you many more. But why, when I grew up, did you take away my chance to go out and make my own money? Why did you make me choose an irrelevant major, just so I could come home to be a stay-at-home husband?" The memories flooded my mind. Her telling me she'd changed my college major only after the application deadline had passed. Her and Chris turning my art studio into a piano room, saying I should practice music to have something in common with Caleb. Them forcing me to keep my phone volume on high so I had to answer their calls the instant they rang. And them arranging my conception plan with the Millers, sending a resignation letter to my job without ever asking for my opinion. It was as if my life had been split in two the moment I presented as an Omega. Even after you did all that to me, molding me into what you wanted, I never said a word against it, I said. Only now am I finally saying what I want. Isn't that enough? I always thought I hated them, but every time I looked into their eyes, a flicker of hope would rise in me, even if it was as fleeting as a soap bubble. Someone told me later that it wasn't hate. It was a love that was too painful. Evan, don't cry, Caleb said. He wanted to step forward and hug me, but he hesitated, not daring to move an inch. I gripped the pottery shard tightly and said, my voice ringing with finality, I don't love you anymore, so I'm not going to put up with you anymore. I saw my parents' bodies tremble, though they tried to feign indifference. I'm 26 years old. I hate tomatoes and fish. You say tomatoes make my skin whiter and fish helps me fill out, but they just make me sick. Same with sweets. The thing I hated most was Mom coming to my parent-teacher conferences. I hate music because I'm completely tone deaf. The person I hate is Caleb. He's my eternal nemesis. And I hate children. I don't want them and I'll never have them. Because in my Omega health class, the teacher said childbirth is excruciatingly painful, and you can die. I don't want to die. A heavy drop of water hit my hand. Was it raining? I looked up. The sky was dark, and the moon had a fuzzy halo around it. The next moment, the sky itself seemed to fall silent for me, growing dim and empty. I heard Caleb running toward me and the shouts from our parents down below. Evan, quick, he fell. When I fell, I landed on the glass roof of the greenhouse they had built for me. The old iron frame gave way, shattering like a flower. I broke a leg and my right arm. After the surgery, I lay in a hospital bed, listening to the muffled conversation between the doctor and Caleb's group just outside the door. The doctor held up the x-rays and my lab reports, sighing. The surgery was successful, but the family needs to be prepared, he said, pointing to the reattached limb on the film. The nerves have been reconnected, but we can't say for sure whether there will be sensory impairment or joint problems later on. Caleb pressed him. Doctor, isn't there any other way? He loves to draw. He can't lose this arm. Hearing this, Monica and Chris stiffened, seeming to age a little more in that instant. The greenhouse they had built for me had become the instrument of my ruin. Mr. and Mrs. Miller silently patted their friend's shoulders, saying nothing. The doctor said regretfully, we will do our best. But as you know, the patient has very little will to live. When a person loses the heart to move forward, they don't just stand still. They run aground in the past. I'll have psychology and the differentiation specialists come for a consultation. Please don't leave the room this afternoon. Spend some time with him. The group saw the orthopedic surgeon off, and the sound of weeping began. I looked out the window. It had been raining for days, a constant, dreary patter. My parents had tried everything, bringing all kinds of porridge that now sat untouched and cold by my bed. The differentiation specialist came early. He reviewed my pheromone analysis report, then examined my scent gland. His face was grim as he turned to my family. What kind of family are you? Do you have any idea his glandular fluid has been completely depleted? No one answered. My voice was dry and raspy. I didn't tell them. The doctor scolded me. That's absurd. Do you realize that if you hadn't made it through the differentiation heat, if you had given yourself a shot of suppressants, you could have died? It was like touching a glass of water filled to the brim. The surface tension broke, and everything spilled out. I know, I said. I never used suppressants. The moment I realized the differentiation heat was starting, I threw them all away and locked myself in the house. To be honest, for years now, I haven't really felt like an Omega. This is better. The differentiation wasn't that painful. I got through it. The specialist fell silent. He looked at me for a long time before asking, your gland has become a hardened nodule and will be reabsorbed by your body. After this, you'll be a beta. Will you regret it? And I said, I have no regrets. I didn't notice the expressions on the faces of the people around me. Anger, perhaps. I thought I could hear the sound of teeth grinding. The psychologist arrived just then. She was a gentle, kind-looking older woman. She greeted the specialist, then took the report from his hands and looked at me. She asked, "What's your name?" I don't think I recognized that character. I didn't speak. Monica answered for me. Evan. It means beautiful jade. The psychologist smiled and interrupted her, holding a hand out toward me. I want to hear it from him. The family can wait outside for a moment. Chris looked worried, glancing back 3 times as he left with the others. Caleb was the last to leave. His eyes seemed full of unspoken words, as if he already knew the answer to the question. Sure enough, he tentatively called my name. Robin. I lifted my eyes and met his gaze directly. His look was earnest, understanding, and clear, just like it was when we were young. Something inside Caleb seemed to break. He looked lost as he fled the room. Now it was just me and the 2 doctors. They watched Caleb leave, exchanging a puzzled glance. The psychologist smiled again and asked me, "What would you like me to call you?" I opened my mouth, and after a long moment, I said, "My name is Robin." "How do you spell that?" "Like the bird," I said, pausing. "It's what my grandmother named me." After the consultation, the doctors led the family members into an empty conference room for a brief discussion. No one looked relaxed. The heavy atmosphere seemed to stretch all the way outside, turning the sky a dark, oppressive gray. The differentiation specialist spoke first. "Based on the blood and bone marrow tests, the results are not optimistic. His pheromones and receptors have completely vanished. Under these circumstances, his original alpha won't be able to soothe him with pheromones anymore. For the post-surgery recovery phase, this was essentially stranding me on a deserted island. He'll have to rely on himself," the doctor said. Chris's heart clenched. "So what can we do?" "Take good care of him. The medical team will do everything we can, and will instruct you on what needs to be done." "Everyone," the psychologist said, knocking on the table, her tone serious, "please listen to me, even if this sounds blunt." Caleb looked up as if startled awake. "This young man doesn't lack the will to live, you understand? His will to live just isn't tied to this identity. My preliminary diagnosis is post-differentiation depression and secondary sex identity disorder." "What does that mean?" someone asked. She explained, "First, the massive hormonal shifts during his differentiation have thrown him into a temporary depressive state, which is why he's engaging in self-harm and other behaviors you don't understand. Second, the patient doesn't psychologically identify with his secondary sex. He doesn't see himself as an omega. We suspect his second differentiation is related to this. Normally, a second differentiation only changes an omega's pheromone level, not their entire secondary sex. Also, during our conversation, he expressed that he's always felt like a beta. He believes his initial differentiation was a mistake, and that who he is now is his true self. That's why he didn't tell you he was going through differentiation. He wanted to become a beta. He also refuses to answer to the name Evan, insisting his name is Robin, the name his grandmother gave him. I have to ask, as his family, how did you raise him to be this way?" No one responded. Finally, as if to cover her own discomfort, Monica said angrily, "What a performance. Weren't we good enough to him? He's acting as if we abused him. He's an omega. How else was I supposed to raise him? We're here for him now, but what about in the future? We nurtured him, found a good match for him so he wouldn't be alone later in life. What did we do wrong?" The doctors were at a loss for words. The psychologist, however, seemed to see right through it. She simply said, "I've already prescribed his medication. But if you truly want him to get better, I have only one piece of advice. Let him go, for now. That's all for today." Everything that needed to be said was said. Both sides signed the medical communication record, and the doctors left. The 2 families sat in silence in the empty conference room. Suddenly, Chris, his eyes red, asked Monica, "When you changed his name, did he already know what his name was? Did you ever ask him?" "I needed his permission to name him," Monica scoffed, but her voice sounded hollow and desolate. "In the years after I was born, the family business ran into trouble. Chris was busy supporting his alpha, so I was sent to live with my grandmother. My grandmother had already named me Robin. She used to say a line from a poem about a wild goose returning home, and told me she hoped I'd always remember to come home. After the business issues were resolved, my parents brought me back, but they disliked my name. A robin's feather was too flimsy. They said it would just blow away. So they changed my name to Evan. It wasn't wrong. For a time, I felt happy and cherished for having such a precious name. But when did everything change? I could have accepted the pain, but not after I had already tasted sweetness. Caleb suddenly spoke. Let him go. For once, Monica didn't look at him kindly. She asked, "Are you telling me to throw my child out on the street and not care if he lives or dies? But can he go on living here?" Caleb asked softly. "Before he fell off the roof, I had him. Caught him. I had him," he murmured. "He's the one who let go of my hand." Silence fell again. After a long time, Monica pulled her Omega to his feet and left. The two families parted on bad terms. My recovery was slow. A month later, they brought me back to the Chin family home. Thick stainless steel mesh had been installed over my bedroom window. The greenhouse, once visible from the upstairs window, had been torn out completely, leaving behind an ugly patch of sod. I was confined to a wheelchair and forbidden from going to the attic. I even had to have someone watching me at all times. At first, it was Chris, but my first reaction upon seeing him was no longer to call him Dad. Instead, I would cover my ears and shut my eyes. Then I'd say, "I don't want to have kids." I guessed he was about to start talking about conception again. He always believed an Omega's duty was to marry and have children. I had argued with him before, but I had given up. Chris watched me for 2 days before someone else took over. When Monica came into my room, she looked almost nostalgic. She stared at the photos hanging on my wall, from age 1 to 16. The traces of a passing youth were moving, but she soon froze. There wasn't a single picture of me after the age of 16. She looked through my bookshelf and found a stack of photo prints at the very bottom. Just as she was about to grab them, she remembered to ask me first. "Can I look?" I sat by the window with my back to her and gave a barely perceptible nod. Monica began to flip through them one by one. The smile on my face in the photos gradually disappeared. The last 2 were stained with tears. One was of me, turning my face away to hide my tears, standing at the entrance of my university holding my acceptance letter for the horticulture program. The other was from just after my 20th birthday, when Caleb and I got our marriage license. At the wedding, everyone was cheering for the newlyweds to kiss. My eyes were squeezed shut, and a single tear rolled down from the corner of my eye, landing on my clenched fist. After that, there were no more photos. She dropped the pictures as if they had burned her and fled my room, breathing heavily. After that, it wasn't Caleb who came, but my confinement was silently lifted. I only realized it when the housekeeper pushed me into the yard to get some sun. I remained indifferent. That day, as we passed the patch of sod where the greenhouse had been, I instinctively looked up and realized just how high I had fallen from. "Are you not happy, young master? Should we go back inside?" "Happy?" Just then, I remembered something. I asked back then, you all heard it. Caleb agreed to a divorce, right? The question was inappropriate. The housekeeper didn't dare answer, just stammered, looking troubled. "Answer me. Just say something." I grabbed her, refusing to let go. Chris appeared from nowhere and wrapped his arms around me, soothingly. It's okay. Then you tell me, Dad. You all heard him, right? Caleb promised me a divorce. My eyes were fiercely red, demanding an answer. Chris said, "Don't talk nonsense, Evan. How could we get a divorce? Where would you find an alpha as good as Caleb? Just calm down." It felt like a bucket of ice water had been dumped over me. A chill rose from deep within. I slowly composed myself, apologized, and asked the housekeeper to leave. I made a mental note to have the butler give her some compensation later. I fell silent again, ignoring everything Chris said, until Caleb came to visit. He brought a special invitation. It was an invitation to a high school reunion. I hadn't been to one in years. I was surprised they even remembered me. I asked Caleb, "What's the meaning of this?" He said, "If you want to go, then go. After you do, we'll talk properly about this." Okay. I heard him call my name with a soft smile. "Go and see them, Robin." Just like I used to always ask him to call me. I agreed. The reunion came quickly, or so it seemed to me. In reality, 2 weeks had passed. I'd said I would come, But standing at the door of the private room, I was suddenly hit with a wave of shame and self-doubt. I didn't have time to hesitate, though. Someone came out of the room just then and we locked eyes. He slapped his own forehead, then threw the door open and yelled, "Robbie's here." My look of surprise quickly turned to horror. His shout seemed to unleash a stampede from inside the room. Without a word, they lifted my wheelchair and carried me into the room. Then someone ruffled my hair hard, and someone else grabbed my face and squished my cheeks. When they finally put me down, I was surrounded. They stared at me, sizing me up, and then, as if they'd all pressed a button on a talking pet, they yelled, "Say something." The corner of my mouth twitched, and I said naturally, "Don't call me Dad." The person opposite me froze, then burst out laughing. "Close the door. It's really Robbie, no doubt about it. You're a real piece of work, you know that? Not visiting us for all these years. What happened to us being family? Yeah, we're gonna have to get you drunk later. Get lost. Can't you see he's injured? You can drink for Robbie later." I looked at the boisterous crowd and finally let out a laugh. "Get lost? All of you?" I said. They wheeled me over to the table and started catching me up on their lives. Someone naturally took care of everything for me, even asking if I liked the dishes they put in front of me. Not that it mattered, they were all gone in a flash anyway. I laughed and scolded them, "You guys are just a bunch of gluttons." They grinned cheekily. Maybe it was the drinks, but my old deskmate lifted me right out of my chair and took off with it. The class president said, "Let me have a turn. I'll give it back when the battery dies." Someone who was too slow cursed her for playing dirty, and she rode my wheelchair out of the room with a few others, leaving me and my old deskmate alone. My deskmate, Zach, had presented as an alpha. He'd had a few drinks already. He spoke first, his voice a little cautious. "Robin, have you been doing okay all these years?" I mumbled, "It's been what it's been." He understood immediately. "At first, we thought you just didn't like us anymore. That's why you never came to the reunions. But then our class president's Omega saw you at the hospital and said you weren't doing well. We figured, no matter what, we had to get you to come, to ask what happened. You've lost so much weight. I could lift you with one hand. Then why did you even ask me just now?" I said, looking up to hold back tears. He grew even more flustered, searching for a tissue to hand me. "Sorry, we just wanted to see if we could help." I wiped my eyes and smiled. "You already have. Today is the happiest I've been in years." Zach let out a sigh of relief. "That's good. If you need anything, you have to tell us. Okay? We're all on your side." I nodded and said okay. But then I asked, "By the way, did you not invite Caleb?" He frowned and scratched his head. "Isn't he your nemesis? Everyone knows that. Since we threw this reunion for you, there was no way we were going to invite him." "Everyone knows?" I asked. "Was it that obvious?" Zach thought for a moment. "At the very beginning, it seemed like you didn't hate him that much. But gradually, whenever he was around, you'd just go silent. You wouldn't say a word, like you wanted to be 5 miles away from him." I gave a helpless smile. "Is that so? Oops." The people outside suddenly burst through the door. My friends walked in awkwardly, but when they saw me smiling, they all relaxed. At the end of the party, as we were saying our goodbyes, one friend who was still a bit drunk said to me, "This is the you we all love." The 16-year-old Robin was so full of life. How did the 26-year-old Robbie get so quiet as a clam? I promised to keep in touch and stayed behind to wait for my driver. Zach waited with me, but it wasn't my driver who arrived. It was Caleb. When he approached, Zach was startled and immediately on guard. I quickly tugged on Zach's sleeve. "It's fine. We've been married for 6 years." Zach looked like he'd gone deaf. He asked again, "What did you say?" "You're married to who?" "Caleb," I said. "But we're getting a divorce soon." "I will get a divorce. I'll find time to tell you about it later." Zach had to swallow 1,000 questions as he watched Caleb take the wheelchair from him and wheel me away. The scene was bizarre, like 2 opposing magnetic poles forced together with superglue, with no one knowing when they would finally snap apart. On the way back, Caleb asked me, "Were you happy, Robin?" For once, I was in a good mood with him and spoke calmly. I was. The class president and the others saw me at the hospital, so they organized the reunion to check on me. "I'm very happy." Caleb smiled too. That's good. The light turned red, and the car stopped at the intersection. They all know I don't like you, I said, turning to look him in the eye. He didn't dare meet my gaze. That's why they didn't invite you. Otherwise, you would have seen our class president racing around on my wheelchair. Yeah, I know. He gripped the steering wheel. I know the class president's Omega came to see you. You were sleeping. He asked me not to tell you. I just said, oh. Honestly, Caleb. I looked ahead at the road again, not sure if I was sighing or just reflecting. I say I hate you, but I don't think I hate you that much. We basically grew up together, but I don't know when it started. Just seeing you made me uncomfortable. Like there was this nameless fire in my gut, as if you'd done something to wrong me. Whenever I saw you, I'd instinctively frown, close my eyes, and try to get as far away as possible. I don't know why. It's not like you did anything wrong. I thought for a moment and corrected myself. You really didn't do anything wrong. You were always good to me except for the whole marriage thing. Caleb finally spoke. But if the beginning is wrong, then everything is wrong. He used to think being good to me would change my mind. Now, looking back, it felt like every kind act was a form of penance. But for what sin? I continued, not long ago, a doctor told me that maybe neither of us was at fault. Maybe I just have a physiological aversion to you. Maybe after I presented as an Omega at 16, I suddenly felt like a watermelon being forced into a mold. Seeing you present as an alpha and then getting engaged to me, that's when I started to dislike you. It was only after my differentiation that I realized my parents' love wasn't so unconditional. Their love was confined to a box, and that box was the label Omega. They always believed Omegas were weak, helpless, and had to depend on others to survive. To teach me dependency, they tried to turn me from a tree into a clinging vine. And because I saw a shadow of that oppression in Caleb, my body reacted before my mind did. It made me stay away from the source of my pain. Even though we were once friends, it didn't stop me from hating him later. Caleb saw the green light, released the brake, and the car moved forward. He sighed. So that's how it was. Guilt washed over me. I didn't know what to say. Apologizing for my coldness over the years felt like invalidating my own suffering. Years of being taught not to hurt others warred with a life that had taught me I also had to love myself. Caleb spoke again. Robin, stop biting your lip. Listen to me. Thank you for telling me the truth. I always thought that somewhere, without realizing it, I must have truly hurt you to make you hate me so much. Now I know I didn't do anything to make you sad. That's good enough. He turned his face away and quickly wiped away a tear. I'm sorry, I finally said. Caleb shook his head, choking back a laugh. Don't be, Robin. We're even now, right? He understood. A person can't really become a watermelon in a box. People cry, they scream, they hurt. The fruit that was forced to ripen was bitter, but they had tasted it to the very end. I smiled too, my voice tinged with emotion. Yeah, we're even, Cale. He suddenly froze, almost losing his grip on the steering wheel. You haven't called me that in a long time. Well, you haven't called me Robin in a long time either. Have you? I said. Let's call that even, too. Back and forth, it felt like we had been silently stabbing each other. And when it hurt, neither of us was willing to let go. Watch the road. Let's just go home. Honestly, if it was this version of Caleb, maybe living with him wouldn't be so impossible. But Caleb didn't take me back to the Chun residence. Instead, he pulled into a brightly lit parking garage. I had been getting sleepy in the car and hadn't noticed where we were going. When he pulled the handbrake, I woke up a little and looked at him, confused. He was slumped over the steering wheel, as if in great pain. After a long silence, Caleb lifted his head. His eyes were red, his hands trembled, but he forced a light-hearted sigh. He nodded toward the glove compartment in front of me. Open it. I have a surprise for you. I saw the hesitation in his eyes, and a strange feeling washed over me. I felt like a balloon being pumped full of adrenaline. I opened the latch and pulled out a file. It was a set of divorce papers. Flipping to the last page, I saw Caleb had already signed his name. My chest heaved. What is this? I asked. I felt like an idiot. Caleb said, the freedom you wanted, Robin. The airport is right above us. I bought you a ticket for a flight that leaves in half an hour to your grandmother's town. Before she passed, she left you a home. Like you said, Robin, you have to remember to go home. I held the papers, laughing and crying at the same time. Why couldn't I stop crying these days? My mom and dad will never agree to this. You know, I love them. I just love them so painfully. If I divorce you without their blessing, it will just create more chaos. Caleb picked up his phone from the center console and lit up the screen. It showed an ongoing call that had been running for 30 minutes. The contact was mother-in-law, and it wasn't on mute. On the other end of the line, two sets of parents were holding their hands over their mouths, utterly silent. That silence was their farewell. Caleb still had the heart to be playful. They're not saying anything, so that means they agree, right? My wide eyes were filled with tears, creating a watery double image of him. We have one more thing to settle, he said, using his handkerchief to wipe the sweat from my brow. Your second differentiation. I didn't know anything about it. When you were in the hospital, I went home to get you some clothes and found the indoor security camera we'd installed. We both forgot about it, but luckily the memory card was big enough. I edited 6 months of footage down to a 1-hour time-lapse video. While you were at the reunion, I showed it to our parents. I'm sorry. I did it without your permission. When Caleb brought the USB drive and a laptop to the Chin house, they were all confused. But they quickly understood. The 5 of them stared at the small screen and watched an omega. He gritted his teeth through the differentiation heat, like a sponge that could never be wrung dry of sweat and tears. On some unknown day, he began to hurt himself. First with his teeth, then with sticks and knives, and then with a rope around his neck. The video lasted for an hour. I forget who was the first to start crying. After a long silence, Caleb, unshaven and with dark circles under his eyes, knelt before Monica and begged for these divorce papers. She had emerged from her study moments later with this very document. The paper was already soft and worn, as if it had been handled many times. It seemed she had prepared it long ago. Caleb had a sudden thought. It was as if everyone knew it wasn't supposed to be this way. How did it ever get to this? I whispered, go back and delete it. I look so ugly in it. Caleb said, leave it. You can come back and delete it yourself. Okay. I gave a bitter smile and clutched his arm. Do you know what I was just thinking? I was finally convincing myself that living with you might not be so bad. And then you give me this. Are you reminding me not to forget what I wanted from the start? The hope that had nearly vanished was rekindled. Caleb must have known. I had been the only one pushing for this divorce. The moment he signed his name, I would run toward freedom without a second thought. Maybe we were just fated to have no future together. He just said, I know, but I don't want to cage you. If you're not happy, none of us will be happy. It's better to end it here, Robin. Be careful with your wounds. Remember to go for your checkups. I've left you some money. Find a caretaker or a housekeeper you like. The butler will go with you first to get things settled. You're going to be on your own now, Robin. Don't drink ice water, and don't eat so many fruits and snacks at once. Take care of yourself. Robin, he said, his hand gently touching my face one last time. I still want to ask you one question. I didn't refuse. Okay. And this is a big if, we had both grown up properly, you studied art, you had lots of friends, and maybe I was one of them in that life, would we have had a chance to be together? Would you have liked me? After a moment, I gently removed his hand and opened the car door. My steps were uneven but firm. I hugged the file folder with my documents inside and walked, step by step, toward the airport entrance. After walking some distance, I turned back. He was still standing there. We looked at each other, speechless. Then, I walked on and never saw him again. Evan never answered that last question. But Robin, by turning back, seemed to have said everything. At 27, Evan took back the name Robin. True to his name, like a migratory bird, he flew back to his old nest. He didn't go back to college. Instead, he opened a flower shop. The man who once found flowers dull and boring now found a quiet joy in watching them bloom. He painted them and posted the art on social media, gradually building a following of people who loved his work. His fans called him the little gardener or the little painter, teasing him in the comments. All right, streamer, say goodbye to your flower shop and your art, and remember to leave us $20,000. He would laugh every time he read the comments, sharing the joy with the employees he'd hired. But his hand did end up having problems. Sometimes it would go numb and ache so painful he couldn't move it at all. He was never off his medication, but he never complained about the pain again. Many years later, Caleb and both sets of parents secretly went to see him, but he had moved his shop and disappeared. It was through his social media that they learned Robin had met a master of traditional painting and was now traveling the country with his mentor, taking in the beautiful landscapes. Robin never stopped painting on his journey. Monica's hair was now streaked with white. She had aged too quickly. When she learned Robin had flown away again, she said nothing, just stood with Chris and the others, quietly looking at the old storefront. Before they could stay long, the new shop owner hurried over. "Are you Robin's family?" he asked. They hesitated for a moment, then nodded. The owner pressed an envelope into their hands, told them to take a look, and then rushed back to his work. Monica eagerly opened it. Inside was a photograph. The scarred nodule on the back of Robin's neck was completely gone. He was pulling his collar aside, flashing a peace sign at the camera with a wide, uninhibited grin. Below the photo was a single line. "My life isn't perfect, and I have no one to lean on, but it's mine, and it's taking shape." On the way home, they bought a square watermelon. The four of them each tried a piece. Monica remarked, "It's not very sweet." Chris replied, "I think it's sweet. Isn't it? The watermelon in the mold is still sweet." Caleb just sighed and said, "But a naturally round watermelon is sweet on its own. Why force a watermelon into a mold just for looks, just for so-called protection?" Undoubtedly, the plastic mold protected the young watermelon from storms and pests. But once the watermelon grew and touched the edges of the mold, that protective love became the root of its suffering. People are the same. It's just that so few of them realize it. Epilogue. Caleb fell asleep and woke up as his 17-year-old self. He was dozing at his desk, and across from him, resting his head on his arms, was Robin. The familiar ache in his arm quickly told him this was real. But he didn't do anything. He just watched Robin quietly for a long time. Caleb remembered the day he realized he was in love with Robin. It was an afternoon just like this one. The Omega had been a restless sleeper, his pheromones drifting everywhere. Caleb had slowly released his own, like a territorial wolf, enveloping all of Robin's scent. At least in that small space, Robin was free and safe. But on this afternoon, Caleb had no pheromones. He was a beta too. Or rather, this was a parallel world with no secondary sexes like alpha, beta, or omega. When Robin woke up, a worksheet was stuck to his face. He puffed out his cheeks and blew it away with a whoosh. It left the imprint of 2 lines of a poem on his cheek. Caleb stared at Robin's fluffy hair, which looked like a round little chestnut. His hand inexplicably started to itch. He reached out, but before he could touch it, Robin grabbed his hand and whined, "Caleb, I want fruit." Caleb chuckled. "It's kale when you don't need anything, but Caleb when you do. You're too much." "So what?" "So, I know a 2-line phrase that can get a man to give me $300,000. He flashed a sly grin and asked, "Want to know what it is?" Caleb played along. "What is it?" Robin said, "Hey, nice car." "For hitting me and sending me flying this far." Robin collapsed into his arms, laughing. The fresh scent of youth, of orange-scented laundry detergent, washed over him, clean and sweet. Caleb suddenly hugged him. "Don't you worry," he said. "When you get sent flying that far, I'll be sure to inherit your $300,000. That did it. Robin shot up and bared his teeth at him. "There's a Comic-Con on the highway tonight. Wanna go? I'll teach you how to get lucky. You just have to cosplay as a speed bump and scare a truck driver." Caleb squished his cheeks. "Tell it to my legal team." Robin wriggled free and flopped onto his bed, punching and kicking his pillow as if it were Caleb's face. "Cale, go cut me some fruit." Caleb sighed in resignation and obediently left the room. He opened the door to a blank white void. Caleb seemed to understand something. He turned back to look closely at Robin. In this world, Robin's name was never changed to Evan. His notebook still had the name of the art school he was aiming for. Even though this was Caleb's bedroom, Robin showed no restraint, as if he'd been doing this for years. Caleb held the doorknob, slowly turning back. Robin was lying on the bed, scrolling through his phone, his feet kicking up behind him. Catching him standing at the door out of the corner of his eye, he mumbled, "Are you waiting for an invitation? I'm not gonna kiss you, you know." After a long silence, Caleb asked, "Are you happy, Robin?" Robin looked at him strangely. "What nonsense are you talking about? You're not cutting me fruit, so I'm not happy." Okay. Caleb understood. He finally, completely understood the answer to his question in this dream. It wasn't a guess, it was a real, tangible life. He stepped into the void, walked down a long path, and woke up again in the familiar black and white room. It was the 10th year since Robin had left. The 10th year since the bond between them had been broken. The Chun house had grown very quiet. Besides the Millers, few people visited anymore. Monica had been sick for a long time. She still felt Robin was ungrateful. She knew she might have been wrong, but how could a child hold a grudge against their parents for so long, refusing to even come home? Chris, on the other hand, often wondered if his experience as an elder was truly outdated. Was the traditional model alpha provides, omega nurtures really so wrong? His own health was failing. Ever since Robin left, he suffered from insomnia. Every night he would think of Robin as a teenager. The sudden shift to a stricter upbringing had left Robin confused and sad for a long time. Robin often made mistakes, he struggled in some subjects, he was a picky eater, he joined the art class without permission. Their verbal lectures turned into physical punishment, and later being locked up. Chris had always thought it was for his own good, so he never intervened much. It was only now, as he lay in the guest room that used to be a storage closet, that he saw how the nailed-shut curtains locked in a suffocating darkness. He finally understood where Robin's fear of the dark came from. Chris broke down and went to find Monica. She was sitting by the window in Robin's room, staring blankly, a stack of photos clutched in her hand. She was as still as a wooden doll. The Miller family, because of Caleb, always maintained contact with the Chens. Mr. and Mrs. Miller had complained about Robin, calling him selfish for not considering anyone else's feelings and for destroying two families. But Caleb only said, "He should have left a long time ago. I was wrong back then. I trapped him for 10 years. Then I showed you his ugliest, most painful moments without his consent. I owed him, and it's just us, his parents. We can support him." When they remembered the Omega, screaming and hurting himself, they said no more. And so the days passed, cold and quiet.